First bill that I'll be signing is SB 266. And what this does is reorient our universities back to their traditional mission. And part of that traditional mission is to treat people as individuals, not to try to divvy them up based on any type of superficial characteristics. We had to look at this new concept, relatively new concept, called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It had probably been there a few years ago, but then kind of the post-BLM rioting and the George Floyd summer of 2020, I think you saw it really take off. This has basically been used as a veneer to impose an ideological agenda, and that is wrong. And in fact, if you look at the way this has actually been implemented across the country, DEI is better viewed as standing for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public institutions.
America, there is just something wrong with this man. There's no other way to describe it. So I'm just gonna give it to you straight, no chaser. Jackson, let's take some of his, what he said, an ideological agenda, and he's talking about diversity and inclusion and equity programs. But he's the one with the ideological agenda. He talked about the BLM summer, BLM and George Floyd summer. Well, for those of you who may have been on planet Mars and not know what BLM stands for, the Black Lives Matter movement, calling it out. And that was the biggest mass movement in this country's history so far. And we know that George Floyd was killed in the streets, cameras rolling. And yes, it set people off because the police officer put his knee on this man's neck. And even though people was telling him not to do it, he did not care. I mean, it's something wrong with this man. And then Jackson, when he says reorient to traditional values or something like that, he used the word traditional. Traditional as in not letting black students attend certain colleges and universities in this country, which is one of the reasons why we needed HBCUs in the first place. Is that the tradition that this dude is talking about? Going to all of his codes, Jackson, and then he talks about superficial concepts, like teaching the truth about this country, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So Jackson, I just pulled a few words from his own mouth. I'm ready to hear your thoughts about this.
Well, it absolutely is American tradition to not include people who aren't white. In fact, the further back you go, the more of a tradition that becomes. So anytime people talk about we have to, go back to the good old days. Well, I mean, even if you just go back to the 60s and the 50s, you look at things like redlining, you look at segregation laws. And again, the further back you go, the more messed up it gets. Just in human history, period. You know what I'm saying? Like just in terms of like how war torn we are and just our attitudes towards one another and tribalism. So going backwards doesn't really make much sense. And also, what are the good old days too, like before Roe? Because he also signed that 6-week abortion ban into effect. And pretty much everything that he's doing is hugely unpopular with broader Americans. And all these reports coming out about how he's just kind of like a very unlikable person. He doesn't really have charisma. More and more people saying that. So as he gets ready to throw his hat into the 2024 presidential primary or the Republican primary, I still don't think he's going to do well. But I think it's a good time for progressives to take advantage of this because I really don't think Ron DeSantis is going to pan out to be like this super juggernaut of the Republican Party like a lot of people think he is. Not to say that he isn't influential, but I think he's incredibly beatable because I just don't think he has it. Nonetheless, he's passing terrible policies.
That is it right there, Jackson. And I hope that he's not. He will be horrible for this country. And I'm gonna continue to say this. He will be, in my estimation, worse than Donald J. Trump. And that's saying a whole lot to say that somebody would be worse. And just even in my conversations with the team earlier today, as we were thinking about our, the segments, this man has real power right now. Donald Trump had the power as the president. This man has the power right now, and he's using it in very awful, tremendously awful and consequential ways. So now this was Governor DeSantis right now, like earlier this morning, not yesterday, not 2 days ago, not 2 weeks ago, bragging about this racist, anti-black and anti-anybody that's not white bill. And here's more from the law. We're gonna put this up. Florida's new law prohibits colleges from spending state or federal money on DEI efforts. These programs often assist colleges in increasing student and faculty diversity, which can apply to race and ethnicity, as well as sexual orientation, religion, and social economic status. So he don't want to see people who are diverse in the mix, whether it's teaching lessons, whether it's on the faculty or staff, he just doesn't want to see it. So Jackie, your point about the further we go back in human history, in most cases, the worse it gets.